Hello people. So this video I wanted to talk about the subject of mysticism from what I suppose is a semi-philosophical perspective. The reason I wanted to talk about this and what I will be referencing and even excerpting parts of is that I spoke previously with Stefan Molyneux about it in a very indirect way, in a sense, because I was commenting on Telegram posts. I wasn't actually speaking to him, and he did a whole hour-long podcast to respond to my points. I didn't really want to specifically talk to his points. Another part of what I wanted to say is just thoughts that I have on mysticism and stuff like that, on how to define it and all that kind of thing. But this specific video, since I was thinking of making a video about this subject anyway, this specific video is actually to push back on something he said at the beginning that was more personal in a sense, or I just realized that I wanted to make a video about this side of it first. So his podcast is number 5217 and it's split into 3 parts. The first part was a kind of personal sort of semi-mind reading kind of emotional response almost. I don't know how best to describe it. If he was listening to it, I imagine there isn't a way to define it that wouldn't offend him. The second side was his definition of mysticism, and so I'll go into it a little bit now. He talks about coherence and consequences in relation to the definition of mysticism. And I have so many questions on that and so many points against it. Stefan Molyneux is, I think, one of the most intelligent people in the world, or that I know of. And I've listened to a lot of his stuff. I think, wow, this guy is like really on it. And he has very powerful wisdom and a lot of times other people are gushing over how intelligent he is and stuff and how well he's articulated things. But for me, this specific classification argument and all that kind of stuff, it makes no sense, and I will go into why that is. The third section was kind of interesting. I don't think I have anything to say about it. I wasn't going to comment on the first side of it either though, so who knows, I might come around to saying something about it. But it's really interesting, just a really interesting way of talking about things, and like, if God exists then XYZ logic. I think that's often very interesting. So I am going to, in this space, drop a little excerpt of what Stefan Molyneux said in his podcast. It starts, I think it's 6 minutes 37 seconds, something like that, and I'm just talking about this part of it first because it kind of annoyed me. I'm re-listening to it, trying to put my argument together on defining mysticism and stuff. To save time, I haven't included his run-up to this. He starts with a message that I'd sent him about this discussion, and I didn't want to go through the 6.5 minutes before he got here. I'm only going to excerpt short bits of what he has said just for length, and it would just seem a bit strange for me to do a whole podcast on Stefan or excerpt his entire podcast, especially since he's basically banned on YouTube. So he starts out excerpting my message to him and then responding to that. And just briefly, I'll just say it before we go into this. I'm critiquing that he puts down mysticism from the perspective that atheism is a sure thing, that Darwinism, evolution is a sure thing. And I was saying I don't think that argument is a good argument. It's not a strong argument. I said weak at the time, and I stand by that, despite how he's going to classify that argument. So we'll listen to him say his bit, and then I will go through a little bit of why I think atheism is not a good argument.
I've always thought Steph's arguments in this area are weak, such as the assumption of atheist as categorically correct, when I understand it to be of the same quality as climate change science. The mainstream encourages it, so that would be likely, right? I never wanted to take this up with him because I did not feel like it was an important part of the entire platform. Like, he mostly offers extremely positive, powerful information. I do not feel like Steph coming over to thinking astrology is legitimate would improve his platform necessarily, but I responded to this provocation. I do not have a platform for my own, so there is no opportunity to invite Steph to a formal debate on the subject. Any such thing, I would make sure I had all my ducks in a row first, rechecking and specifically sourcing many points. This may take a few weeks. So, and somebody says, why do people never want to get onto the live stream and ask a question? And so I replied, weak is, so he said, I always thought Steph's arguments in this area are weak. Now, weak is a term of sophistry, a weak argument. See, weak attempts to implant powerlessness into the mind of the reader and thus associate a negative term with the argument. Right? This is a basic, it's like hate speech, right? You take a pejorative and you attach it to a person or an argument, and then you're attempting to correlate a disgust response or a contempt response to the debate or to the argument or to the arguer. It's just like attaching something that smells foul to someone so that they're unpopular. I mean, it's a wretched and rather base and pathetic trick. It's a weak argument. Well,
Okay, so base and pathetic trick. Okay, that it was a little bit of a curveball. It's fine. I did think that he was a little angry but I shouldn't do any of that because he'll be like, oh no. So how do I define weak? Firstly, I didn't say it is a weak argument. It definitely is this thing. I am defining this thing as weak, so it can't escape that classification. I said, in my view or opinion, or I think. I said something like that. And how I define atheism as a weak argument is that atheism doesn't have proof behind it. Now, I read a lot, and I haven't properly gone back to the reading up on this, so this guy's tweet will suffice. He's actually exerted Darwinism here, Darwin himself. Atheism is a weak argument, or Darwinism, I should say, because it sounds true on the surface, but if you go below that, there's no evidence for it. For instance, as this image shows, if atheism were true, as it is, so if Darwinism were true without any interference by whatever has happened in our distant past, then the world would just be one ape and then one 7/8 ape and then one 3/4 ape, and then it would slowly become more human. But there isn't that. The skeletons don't exist, and if the skeletons did exist, you could bet that the mainstream that believes in and promotes atheism would show them everywhere. They would be in every museum, but they just don't exist. That is a weak argument. And on the idea of weak and strong, so I have a disability, right? So this is just personal information that you have to bring out when someone says these sorts of things. I have a disability. I am today, for instance, I have had an issue with my medication, and I have been not bedbound really, but I've been dizzy and all that sort of stuff until about 5 PM. So I would have to describe myself as kind of disgusting, like he did there. And also, not everything has to be defined in relation to abuse dynamics, which is what he kind of does. So yeah, if I was saying it again, I might say that argument lacks scientific verifiability, or I'd find another way to say it, but weak, since it offends people, obviously. But yeah, when he said that, actually, I kind of all of a sudden questioned all the sort of semi-mind reading that he does in his shows. Like when he gets an argument with someone, or in various situations in his shows, he sort of says, oh, you're sort of feeling and thinking this. And a lot of the time people really, really agree. So he is probably right most of the time because of that. But I don't know. It was just a bit of a weird feeling for me, because I had assumed him to be kind of right about everything, I suppose. So here's a tweet. I haven't done it yet, but I will probably, when I do the video, put on the screen his other tweets, because he makes other cases, and I've heard other things against Darwinism. But here we go. So 2. Darwin predicted countless transitional fossils, but they never showed up. Darwin believed that over time we would find the intermediate fossils his theory required. He admitted the fossil record didn't support him in his day, but hoped future discoveries would. Darwin's quote, "The number of intermediate varieties which have formerly existed on the Earth must be truly enormous." Truly enormous. There are none. There are hardly any. There's like a few museums with ambiguous skeletons in various places. He acknowledged the problem. Why then is not every geological formation and every stratum full of such intermediate links? So this is him saying it. This is him critiquing. Geology assuredly does not reveal any such finely graduated organic chain, and this perhaps is the most obvious, gravest objection which can be urged against my theory. Origin of Species, Chapter 10. Darwin's hope the fossil record was incomplete and future discoveries would fill in the gaps. The reality that it's been over 160 years and the enormous numbers of missing links still haven't turned up. We continue to see sudden appearances of complex, fully formed organisms. Another false prediction. And then you have the image there. So like Darwin's own words there, the lack of such skeletons would be the strongest evidence against his own theories. And in general, this is one of the things that annoys me slightly, and I will just talk about it a little bit. People that are skeptical of astrology or channeling, and I'm going to be talking about all of those in the subject of mysticism, because unlike our coherence and whatever argument, the way we should define mysticism should relate to what is commonly defined as mysticism. So things like channeling, astrology, what links all these things. But so another one that annoys me, someone else that I like a lot as well, actually, someone called Stephen Cambion, who talks about false prophets, false psychics and that kind of thing. And I've seen it on other times when people have criticised New Age figures, is that they always kind of hold themselves as the sort of arbiters of truth. So in Steve Cambion's example, one of the things that he said was that there's this guy called David Wilcock. I was a true believer of David Wilcock, I should have mentioned that earlier, when I had this argument with Stefan, and I thought his arguments were airtight, and that's where I first found out about these anti-Darwinism arguments. And that is like, I was almost like a cult follower at that time, and I had true belief. That's why I thought my argument was very good at that point, and David Wilcock has turned out to be a con artist. But be that as it may, even though Stephen Cambion is in the right to say things about David Wilcock and what a scam he is and what a horrible person, he talks things down like QAnon. There is a lot of evidence for QAnon. I see decodes all the time, and I should probably, as part of this mysticism little series, talk about that. But in relation to David Wilcock, David Wilcock believes that he's channeling an angel or an angelic source. One of the things that Stephen Cambion says is, why would an angel choose you because you're such a sinner, and all this kind of stuff. But the Bible and Christians will often say, oh, God chose this person even though they were an adulterer. God chose this person even though they were barren. God chose Saul. In normal Christianity and traditional Christianity, which is assumed by default to be true from one of these sorts of creators, Saul was a mass murderer who then became Paul, who's an apostle for God. So when Stephen Cambion says, oh, why would an angel channel through you, David Wilcock, because you're such a sinner? Well, that is direct contradiction with your beliefs, your stated Christianity. Another thing that he says is the way that the Christian church classifies prophets and false prophets is that if you are ever wrong even once, then you are a false prophet. Well, there are plenty of biblical prophets that were wrong. For instance, Jonah, when he went to the Ninevites, I think it was, horrible cult that sacrificed children and such, he went up to them, he hated them, he was forced to go in the whale because he just didn't want to go. And he said to them, the coming of the Lord is at hand, you will be destroyed, or something like that. And then the Ninevites flipped and they were like, oh my God, this is terrible. And they got a lot better. And then their land was saved and they weren't destroyed. Right. So technically Jonah, under that example, is a false prophet. And Paul in Thessalonians talked a very similar thing to what David Wilcock talks about today, about how we're all going to ascend and all this stuff within Paul's lifetime. So I don't know, it's just the idea of putting forth Christianity as this authority when it's not an authority, even on its own standards. And Christians, they just ignore this, you know. Paul said all this stuff to the Thessalonians, none of it came true. They just ignore it. And it's that kind of, with skeptics in general, it's that kind of thing. It's the, I am going to state all truth, but I'm not going to justify it. It just is the truth. So you're basically doing the same thing as the person you're criticizing. This isn't true in Stefan's case, in fairness. This is just a little bit of an annoyance, because he then does go on to define consequences and coherence in relation to mysticism. That is the power of philosophy. You always have to back up your claim. But yeah, it's just one of these things. I don't think it's legitimate for someone who's being a skeptic and, oh, astrology is all incorrect, or, oh, all these people channeling are mad, when your own side is just so full of holes, like even worse than the people you're criticizing often. And yeah, wasn't it Jesus that said that he who is without sin cast the first stone? But yeah, a lot of holes in Christianity, and where various books were written, rewritten after temples were destroyed and stuff, and very interesting area, and you never quite know what's true, I found. Anyway, that's all for the moment. What I plan my next video to be in is to break down this coherence consequences argument. He gives an example of what he thinks isn't mysticism, basically because it sounds like because he likes what the mystic process produced. Like if somebody's told to go and help children and they do it, then that's not mysticism. Whereas if somebody's clearly mad, then that is mysticism. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be hard. I don't feel like it's going to be hard for me to break this down, even though Stefan is as intelligent as he is, and he's usually right. But anyway, these are just my thoughts. Just my thoughts. I don't go viral. I have like about 10 views on a YouTube video, so it's just me chatting out here. Anyway, thank you for listening.